This is BattleCon 2016. My name is Brad Pomerantz. So glad to be with you today. I host Charter Local Edition, which airs statewide on several different networks. We're in the beautiful Los Angeles City Hall, and we're here to speak with two individuals about Proposition 51. Of course, on the ballot today, or November 8th, I should say, 17 statewide initiatives. Proposition 51 is one of them. It is a school construction bond, $9 billion to be spent statewide. That would be $7 billion for K-12 and $2 billion for community colleges. On the yes side of the proposition is Jenny Hannon. She is with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. On the no side is Rick Marshall. He is with the California Taxpayers Action Network. We'll start with opening statements from both, I don't want to say candidates, but I guess supporters of their position, and then we'll have a great conversation. Jenny, why don't we begin with you supporting Proposition 51?
That's great. Thank you for having us. And I'd like to thank the sponsors of this program, and I'm excited to be here to talk about Proposition 51. 6.2 million children in K-12 public education in California. 30% of those children are in classrooms that are over 50 years old. Another 40% are in classrooms over 25 years old. My name is Jenny Hanna, with an H on me, and that's all right. And I am proud to be the chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. We're sponsors of Prop 51. The California Constitution makes K-12 education a state priority. This constitutional requirement means that the state has an obligation to ensure all students have access to quality classrooms, not just access to quality teachers and textbooks. Proposition 51 will fund 14,000 new classrooms and repair 44,000 classrooms in K-12 schools. Proposition 51 will fund priority health and safety projects and classrooms for community colleges. Finally, Proposition 51 replenishes the out-of-money financial hardship program so important to our low-wealth school districts and the facility hardship program that pays for fixing health and safety problems in our schools.
We'll continue more in a few moments, Jenny.
Okay.
Hannah. Now we'd like to speak with Rick Marshall with the California Taxpayers Action Network opposing Prop 51.
It's great to be here today, and if there's one thing I want you to go away with from this debate today, it's the fact that Proposition 51 is unnecessary. It's unnecessary because on this November ballot statewide, there's 184 local school bond measures. Our experience since Proposition 39 lowered the voter threshold to 55% is that over 80% of them passed, and in fact, last June, over 90% of them passed. That's going to put $20 billion more locally around the state. We don't think we need Proposition 51 because it allows developers to shift their costs onto taxpayers. And that's a major reason we're opposed to it, and it's also a major reason that Governor Jerry Brown is opposed to this measure. We ask that you really look hard at this. I know it's motherhood, apple pie, and Chevys, and you both vote for school bonds, but this is not one that we need.
Rick, has Governor Brown come out officially against Proposition 51?
I'm not going to say what Governor Brown says. I'm only going to quote what the LA Times said. He said last February, when what did become Proposition 51 was qualified for the ballot. He said he was against the $9 billion developer bond. It's a blunderbuss. Now, Brad, a blunderbuss is a gun. And that's how Jerry Brown.
Okay, but I do think it's fair to say that Governor Brown has not taken an official position on Proposition 51.
I do think it's fair to say that no member of the press has gone to Governor Brown and asked him, are you supporting or opposing Proposition 51?
Okay, let me ask you, Jenny, about one of the comments that Rick made, and that focused upon local school bonds.
Yes.
What we do know is there is a provision to allow local schools to go to their voters to pass these revenue bonds. As Mr. Marshall said, there are about 180 on the ballot in November. We're in Los Angeles County today, and throughout Los Angeles County, there are 24 K-12 local bonds and 3 community college bonds with indebtedness of about $24 billion. How would you respond to Mr. Marshall's concerns that we have all these local measures and a state measure on top of it?
What I would say is that local bonds and the depth of what we see on the ballot shows to me the need for school facilities in the state. The state program is available for matching local school districts, and the reason only relying on local school district funding doesn't work is you have high wealth areas where property taxes or property values are higher, and then you have low wealth areas where, like in my area, Kern County, where we have low property values, we cannot raise enough money to build the schools or the facilities or renovate and repair the facilities that we need with local bond dollars. Local bond dollars are important because they're skin in the game. That's the local control. That's getting your community out to support what is needed for public education. The state dollars come in and help supplement that. I think you would see on many of those local bond measures that they are counting on Prop 51 passing so they can do all of the projects on their list that they identify in those local bond measures. And also, let me just add,
Please.
Local bond measures do raise your taxes. They raise your property taxes, right? You get an assessment on your property tax bill. Prop 51 would not raise your taxes. It's just identifying and prioritizing where the state spends the tax dollars that they already collect from us. It's telling them that school facilities are an important part of the state infrastructure.
Rick, I want to dovetail toward what Jenny just discussed, and that's this notion of local match. Because it is undeniable that throughout California, so often Sacramento will require, we can call it self-help, that's really a transportation term, but require before they'll give funding to an entity, that entity have dollars dedicated. Not only does Sacramento do that though, but Washington DC does that. And so is it such a bad thing per se that you have these different layers of government working in tandem to leverage dollars in such a way that allows for more dollars to come in, be it through Sacramento, DC, or whatever it may be?
Well, one of the problems is when you have all these layers of government leveraging this money, is the regulations come right along with it. And so our schools end up having to follow all kinds of rules just in order to get the money. That's the problem with what's called the state facilities program. When school districts, yes, there is a match. If you're going to do new construction, it's 50% match. If you're going to do modernization, it's 60% match. That's called the state facilities program. But one of the problems with that, and it needs major reform, and we won't reform it with Proposition 51 because there's a provision in there that says the state legislature can't do anything about changing this until after we've spent all the new construction money. But let me just give you one example of a reform need. Money is allocated on a first-come, first-served basis. That means large school district like Los Angeles Unified, which has a permanent facility staff of over 400 people and who know how to navigate the maze of over 10 state agencies to get this money, they're there first and in line quickly. Little districts like maybe yours have to hire consultants to do that for you, and you get behind, so you're in behind these people. There's there's like $2 billion in the pipeline right now. And Proposition 51 sets aside this $9 billion, $3 billion for new construction. If you need modernization, you can't pull out of that pot. If you need, and modernization is the same way, $3 billion. Then the $2 billion for community colleges, it's all split up. And then you didn't mention there's $1 billion that's going to be split between public charter schools and trade tech schools.
How would you respond to the concern that there's prioritization already predestined?
So that's sort of misinformation. I've worked in the school facilities program for 20 years, and I do work in an area where there are very many small rural school districts. We have just as much opportunity to access these funds as big school districts do, and many of us do. You have to have eligibility. First come, first serve is just not accurate. You have to have eligibility to either get new school construction grants or qualify with old enough schools to get modernization or renovation funding. Then secondly, the idea that you need a consultant to apply for the funding. Small school districts under 2,500 have access to funds to assist them with that, but I frankly don't use consultants when I apply for the funding. Most of the complexity in the school facilities program is around the construction of schools, and frankly, I think that we want that. We want our schools to be the safest buildings that we have besides hospitals.
But let me ask you, if I may. Rick does bring up a point that Governor Brown has brought up, and that is a concern about the bureaucratic regulatory maze that is school construction. Now, that may be a discussion for another day, but I do think it's important for us to try to unpack that as we look at Prop 51 and the other 27 measures on the ballot in LA County and 180 measures that are on the ballot throughout the state. Talk us through that, Jenny.
So I would need about 5 hours. What I would say is even if a school district used all of their local funding, there are very few things that they can skip in terms of qualifications and getting their projects certified through the state. They can't avoid the state architect's office and the seismic and accessibility and energy requirements that are required of all of our schools. They cannot skip through site approval processes with the Department of Education. So the school funding piece of this is a section of the school facilities program, but it's not the most complex piece. The most complex part of what we do has to do with assuring that we build safe schools, that we build appropriate schools, and that we meet all the requirements of our state regulations.
I want to speak with you, Rick, about the support surrounding Prop 51, which is fairly wide and fairly deep. And what's remarkable to me about this proposition, it was in a lot of ways many years in the making. I can recall Republicans who tend to be wary about these types of initiatives being very strong in favor of a school construction bond. In the last session, the session before that, I know former leader Kurt Hagman, who's a Republican, was really trying to get a school bond measure on the ballot. He could not get it on the ballot when he was still in Sacramento. So could one argue that this is really a compromise between Democrats and Republicans that finally were to be able to come together to come to a bond that makes sense for all parties? And so do we want to blow it up at this point when it took so long to get to the ballot?
I think we do, because the same bond that is now 51 was put before the state legislature back in 2014 by Kurt Hagman and Joan Buchanan, and Governor threatened to veto it.
He did.
And it went down. The big thing about Proposition 51 is there's something called developer fees, which I need to explain a little bit. You see, when developers build new housing subdivisions, they are charged a fee for each house they build, and that fee is supposed to go and help build the new schools that those houses are going to need. When there is a state bond money available, that developer fee is cut in half. If there's not state bond money available, it goes up to 100%. What we say is that developers are allowed to shift their costs onto taxpayers this way, and we think that's wrong. We believe they should pay their full share. They're getting the housing, and they need to help do the schools, just like they do the streets and the sewers and the gutters and so forth.
But so I do think Rick has a point. I don't know much about developer fees, but what I do know, and I'm going back to what we were talking about, is that there is a palpable frustration surrounding contracting with the state of California, not just in the school bond area. And so let's just presume for argument's sake that Prop 51 passes. As the polls suggest, can we get to a place where the construction community can come together to try to reform this? Because it's frustrating for folks like me who have kids in schools that Rick can bring up these points that, they're valid. The whole bureaucratic maze debacle if I can, speak in hyperbolic phrases.
Okay, so that was pretty broad, but I'll try. So controversy gets press.
Yeah.
This school facilities program, since 1998, has renovated and built hundreds of thousands of square feet of classroom space very successfully. We call it a public-private partnership because developers do pay for a percentage of to mitigate the growth that their houses bring to our school districts. They do that even with the state program, and I think that's a misconception by some. We're not trying to take them off the hook. We are out of funding. Developers only pay for new classrooms. They don't pay to renovate and repair our schools. About a third of Prop 51 is for new capacity or new schools, which the developers would participate in anyway. And so this bond is really not just about developers, it's about the whole picture of school facilities. Our kids cannot wait. We've been without a bond for 10 years. 2006 was the last time that this was brought to our voters, and we are in great need of these funds. The $2 billion was mentioned earlier. Those are projects waiting to be funded, and there's so many more out there.
Rick, I have to ask you, I think it's undeniable what Jenny says. I have gone to several schools throughout the state, and they look the same as they did when I went to school in the olden days, in the last century. I have been to several schools with no air conditioning, and we're starting school in August, and it is hot in August, September, and October. We're in the 21st century now, and schools are not able to be wired. And I'm speaking as a patrician because I work for a company that wires schools, Charter Communications. So let's dig deep and really look at that question. What about our schools that are circa 1967?
Well, those are schools that need modernization. But Brad, since 1998, when the schools facilities program was first started, we've spent $146 billion statewide on our schools. We definitely have some new schools. You can go around LA Unified and see those. There's a lot going on right now, and the people are stepping up to repair their schools. As we're saying, we don't need Proposition 51 to do that. The people are stepping up to do that. Those districts that need that, and out of the 1,000 school districts, there's maybe 50 or less that need help. We would support a much smaller targeted school bond of those districts who don't have the assessed valuation to fund a school bond or who can't pass a school bond. But that's not the problem. Los Angeles Unified, this very moment, just in 2008, passed a $7 billion bond, which they haven't even begun to use. I don't mean to downplay them, but the thing of it is the people have stepped up to the plate locally in those areas. There's no reason why I should pay for schools in San Francisco and why people in San Francisco should pay for schools down here for my kids to attend.
Well, why not? I mean, we are one California. Are we not all in this together? We have about 30 seconds before we have quick closing statements.
Public education should be equitable across the state. We are huge, 6.2 million children. And we have such great differences in the wealth across the state. I'm from the Central Valley. I can tell you we are very unlike Southern California or Northern California. I would say to the opposition, the comments that they're making don't help our public school children. It's going to create, if we don't have this bond, we are going to have a system for the haves and the have-nots across the state, and I don't want to see that happen, so I would appreciate your support on this proposition.
Rick, final moment.
Final moment. Yes, I want you to go away with one thing. We've passed 4 of these bonds since 1998. They were always placed on the ballot by the state legislature, and they had the support of the governor, both Republicans and Democrats. This one doesn't. This was placed on the ballot through a signature initiative process funded by the developers. If you don't believe that this is a developer issue, you just need to do a little research and find out that school districts went to the state allocation board here last May and said, let us raise the fees to 100%. The very next day, the developers went to court and got a stay, and it was only recently lifted.
I just want to say for the record, Governor Brown has not come out for or against Proposition 51. We need to conclude.
I know, but the Republican and Democratic Party both endorse this proposition.
Fair enough. Her name is Jenny Hanna. She is a supporter of Prop 51. His name is Rick Marshall. He is an opponent of Prop 51. I just have to say I thought you both did an outstanding job. I appreciate the deference and respect you showed to each other. And I want to say to you, our viewers, November 8th is around the corner. If you don't vote, you really can't complain. So please vote on November 8th. My name is Brad Pomerantz. We're coming to you from Los Angeles City Hall. This is BattleCon 2016.
That was great. That was great.